Okay, everybody, welcome to the Oxygen Addict podcast. We're brought to you every week by our sponsors, precisionfuelandhydration.com. You can personalize your fueling and hydration strategy so you can perform at your best with 15% off your first order of electrolytes and carbohydrate fuel with the code OA23 at precisionfuelandhydration.com. So welcome to the show, everyone. I'm your host, Coach Rob Wilby, and I'm joined by co-host Chris Palfreyman. Coach Chris, how are you today?
Hello, Rob. Hello, everyone. I'm very well, thank you.
Great to have you back on, buddy. So a couple of things. We bring you this episode or bring this podcast every week with really one aim. We want to inspire you. We want you to leave feeling motivated and inspired to go out and smash your training and maybe even enter events that you've not thought of before. You could do us a really big favor. If you like this episode, please like it and subscribe on either your podcast player or in YouTube, wherever you're listening to it. And if you're looking for help and advice with your training, please do get in touch. You can email us to help@oxygenaddict.com, or there's a link in the show notes. We've had a couple of emails through just this morning, actually, from people, Chris, saying just really nice emails. So thank you. I really appreciate it when people do that. Just thanks for putting the podcast out. And people who have got races coming up, or they've been feeling a little bit worried or nervous about the races, and they've said, just listening to us two having a chat about races and the approaches we take to it has really helped them out. So if you're one of the people who's emailed this week, we really do appreciate you taking the time to write through. And if you're sitting at home thinking, give us some help with some of this, then just drop us a line. So this episode, Chris, is going to be a slightly different one. Instead of it being coaching advice, we're going to do a bit of a monthly catch up, you and me talking about what we've been up to, what the team's been up to, what Team Oxygenaddict have been up to, what our athletes have been doing, and finding out a little bit about, well, the world of racing in general, because it's all kicking off at this time of year, isn't it?
Yeah, it really feels like the season's going, the season's moving. We're way out of the winter block. And, I remember talking about how to get through winter and all those episodes, and how different does everything feel? The weather, people's fitness, the excitement about which race they're going to do, the traveling around the world to go and chase these epic challenges. So yeah, it feels as if this is the exciting time of the year now, and hopefully people are just as excited as us.
Yeah, people have done an awful lot of hard work all the way across the winter, and it all leads up to, I always think of May as the traditional start of the season. And although the season is getting earlier and earlier and earlier and people can race earlier, it always feels to me like mid-May is when, certainly in the UK, the first races can happen where you don't need really good luck in terms of local weather for a few days before the race for the water to be warm enough to not be life-threatening. So it's a really good time of year. So we've had a whole bunch of racing happening over the last few weeks. We thought we'd catch up on a few bits and bobs that have happened there. First up, though, Chris, I want an update on what you've been doing with your racing. So let's kick off with you, because a lot of the listeners will know you were quite savagely unwell, weren't you, a couple of months back? And we really worried at the time it had put not just a dent in your season, but had effectively ended your season before it even started. So give us an update, what's happening there?
Yeah, and I think firstly, I've got to thank you, Rob, because you gave some great kind of words of wisdom when things were looking terrible for me in terms of my health. And I was looking at basically cancelling every race and every training session that I'd had in my plan. And you kept kind of reassuring me that just let things play out, ride the terrible wave, and in a month's time, the world will look very different to you. And that's exactly what it is. So I had 4 or 6 weeks of a pretty bad illness, which meant no training and some time off work, and everything was derailed after a pretty good solid winter. But I feel that I owed it to myself, and I owed it to the athletes that we work with. That I'm always pointing athletes to going to do their race, whether it's an A race, B race, or C race, even if training or life hasn't gone as perfectly planned. Because the reality is, very few athletes on the start line have had the perfect build-up, and even the perfect build-up doesn't mean the perfect race. So I think we've got to be open-minded to, when things don't go our way, find a way to get the best possible experience out of it. So that kind of narrative really helped me kind of get back on my feet. And I know that I'm not at my fittest, but that's okay. That doesn't matter. No one cares. No one else cares about what potential you've got or what your perfect race looks like. That's just you in your head. I basically turned up to this UCI off-road gravel race in Scotland, which is a race that I've been waiting for about 5 years. Ever since I've started taking gravel racing seriously, I've always waited for a big international event to come to UK shores and attract international athletes and international talent, and basically the best racers that there are off-road. So it would have felt terrible sitting at home. So long story short, I was on the start line with very little confidence in my kind of ability and preparation, but I just had so much confidence that I'd made the right decision because I was excited on that start line. And I kind of thought, what's the worst that can happen? I'm in Scotland at the biggest race that I've been waiting for. Let's see what happens. This is great, no pressure. So it went off really well. I got a pretty good start.
Hang on. Before you tell us about the
Okay.
race, there's all kinds of details we need to jump into here. So first things first, because this event is just madness. It's the most brilliantly epic, crazy, mad thing I've heard. You've mentioned it's an off-road gravel race. How far is it?
So it's 115 kilometers with 95% off-road. There's a few little joining tarmac sections from trail to trail. There are 1,000 entrants, so pretty big international field, people flying in from all over. And it's organized by the UCI, which means that the top 25% of each age group is given the opportunity to go and race the World Championships, which happen to be in Italy this year. So it's fast, it's furious, it's pack racing. So the gun goes off and you essentially all go together. So whether you're Connor Swift from Team Ineos or you're Chris Palfreyman from Oxygenaddict, you're on the start line together and you're racing full throttle, all age groups. There was a 79-year-old doing it and there's some 19-year-olds doing it. And the rules are get from A to B as quick as you can, stay safe, and yeah, race hard. And the racing really is hard. And
how do they manage the start? How do they manage 1,000 people in the area going all together?
They split out the male and female. So the female went off 40 odd minutes before the men, and the female field was huge. I don't know how many females there were, but it was very impressive. You know, they filled a whole street of female athletes. And then in the men's, they kind of split it up by age group just with a piece of rope between the mass field. So essentially when you all go, you are all going together, but you are surrounded by people in a similar age group to you.
Right, okay.
So this is where I'm going to have a little rant, and I'm going to try and not keep it too negative because the overall kind of feelings I've got from the event is pure positivity. But my little rant is going to go on for 2 minutes. So they invite international stars on the front line, and I've got absolutely no problem with that. And I think there are 25 that the UCI allowed, so male and female. And it's basically the international cycling stars, the likes of Connor Swift, Ali Brownlee, triathlete, was in there, and guys, Alex Dowsett, guys that have got international palmares, which is brilliant. But the likes of Ali Brownlee, Dowsett, and there are about 7 others are in my age category, but they line up on the front, they get their photos, quick interviews. That's okay. But then they have 150 really hungry athletes that are right behind them, and they're in the age of 19 to 34, then a piece of rope, and then the guys that are 35 to 39. I happen to be in the 35 to 39, but technically I'm racing Ali Brownlee, Dowsett, and all those guys who get a real clean run at the course straight into the track. And I've got 150 people that are massively affecting my race between me and the guys I'm trying to get to. But if they beat me, it's irrelevant, or if I beat them, it's irrelevant. They're nothing to do with my race because it's an age group race. So I'm there on the start line. I'm right on the front of my category thinking, oh my God, I've got to get through 150 people to even start thinking of racing your Ali Brownlees of this world. And so it's really frustrating, but it's a small detail, and I'll let the organizers know my opinion, but all they need to do is keep the age groups together. Anyway, so that's how it goes, and the gun goes off, and off you go, full throttle. It was about 800 meters on road until you peel off onto the tracks, and then it just becomes a cloud of dust because we're on off-road gravel and it's elbow to elbow racing, everyone going at close to 100%, knowing that it's all about getting a good position and settling in, which is really exciting. And I got to where I wanted to be. I was surrounded by the guys that I was hoping to be surrounded by. And then I hear the dreaded noise with sealant spraying everywhere. And that was at the 5 kilometer point, just at the top of the first climb. And I think part of it is luck and being really unlucky. These things do happen. But I also think that there's a bit of poor race management from me. And there is such thing as tire management. And I didn't manage my tires well over that rocky section, and I was just a bit too much on the wheel of the guy in front, and I could have potentially seen this sharp rock, and I didn't. And huge slit in my tire. I'm on the side of the road, bike upside down, trying to fix it, sealant spraying everywhere, trying to decide what do I do. And it took me a long time to fix it, and I don't think I could have fixed it any quicker. It's just, it so happened that the slit in that tire was that big that it was going to take me a long time to find a solution.
Yeah.
So yeah, then it's frustrating because you're where you want to be, and you're on the side of the road. And after about 15 minutes or so, the off-road vehicle came up to me and said, "Hello, I'm the broom wagon. You're in last place. I've got to let you know that if you're not confident you're going to make the cut-off times, then it's a safer place to roll down the hill back to the start." And that's knee-jerk reaction was, in the politest way, said, "Oh, don't worry about me. I'm getting back to where I need to be. I just need time to fix this." And so that person was really nice, and they said, "As long as you're okay with that, we're gonna go and help other people up the road." So that kind of gave me a new perspective on, all I have to do is fix this tire and then get to the finish line, and I'll be happy. So in the end, that happened. I fixed it. Probably took me about half an hour, and then did another few kilometers. And I saw one of my best mates on the side of the road with a very similar issue, and a frustrating one because he didn't have the tools that he needed to fix his issue. So pulled on the side of the road, helped him out for a while, and then I carried on. And that's kind of where the decision was made of, forget everyone else, get from A to B as quick as you can, make yourself proud. And for me, it turned into a celebration of health. Whereas I don't know how many weeks ago it was, but in April, I was basically in bed thinking, I should probably sell my bike because I can't imagine ever feeling healthy enough to go for even a casual ride. And here I am on a start line of an international race. And just because things didn't go my way, it doesn't mean it's the end of the day. And it was probably my worst ever result in terms of where I ended up on the finish list, but it was one of the most fulfilling events I've ever done. I absolutely loved it, Rob. I can't tell you. I had a smile the whole way around, and it was really hard. I worked really hard. I just bloody loved it. It was amazing. And out in the wilderness, I averaged just under 170 beats a minute for 4 hours. So I was working really hard. And I ended up basically trying to make a bit of a party bus and just going as hard as I can. And when I overtake people, offer them a lift, get on. I was just shouting, "Get on if you're feeling good." And by the end, I had a good, good train of 15, 20 athletes who were good, but had mishaps along the way. And they all had faces like death because they were all gutted that they were racing towards the front, but something didn't happen. But it turned into a genuine party bus, and we were laughing. It turned into a joke. We were chewing as the mega train was flying through the trails, and it was really fun. And I mentioned Brownlee towards the start of the episode, but it was a nice kind of turn of events that he ended up on the party train. And he was at one point leading the whole race, and he crashed out, then a puncture, and he was kind of riding easy to the finish until the party train came through. And even though I shouted, "Brownlee, get on, the party train's here." And he just shook his head saying, "No, mate, I'm done, no." And then 5 minutes later, I look back and I can see his distinctive helmet on the back, down in the drops, loving life, with a big smile on his face, with all the dust kicking off from the other guys around him. And he got on the train, and he got on till the end. And it was just a nice moment for me to think that 3 hours earlier, I was on the side of the trail thinking I'm probably going to walk back to the start. But in the end, I ended up riding with, one of the guys that I respect the most in the sport in terms of what he's achieved, and many other athletes. Ruth Hastel got on the party train as well, who crashed out, and loads of kind of inspirational athletes that have done massive things, and they had to turn their mentality around of, it didn't go my way, but let's get on the party train. And we went real hard. We went real hard.
I was going to say, I think the phrase party train here, I've seen the power file from this race. It didn't look a lot like a party to me. It looked like an absolute 4 hours of suffering at close to 5 watts a kilo.
Exactly. Well, that's what was so fun. Just because we were in 200th place instead of fighting for the top 10 doesn't mean that you don't try and put out 5 watts a kilo for 4 hours. Who cares about the other 200 people ahead? This is, for me, it was just an expression of fitness, health, being so happy, and see it as an opportunity. And I was smiling, and I was in a lot of pain. It was really hard. I was cramping, all sorts, and my mind was saying, slow down, what's the point? But then my body was saying, let's keep going. You've got Brownlee on your wheel. Why the hell would you sit up? This is so fun. So yeah, I crossed the line, and here's a funny little anecdote for you. So I ended up doing the work on the party train. I just sat on the front, I started it, and I was going to finish it, and people were offering to help at occasions, but I just said, no, just enjoy the backseat ride. This is for me. And then with, I don't know, 400 meters to go, I just hear this whoo, 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 which is basically the wheels spinning up real quick. And what do I see? Ali Brownlee with a massive grin on his smile, just shouting, let's go, let's go. And I'm thinking, Ali Brownlee is sprinting for 200th place, and he's going absolute max out, and everyone was chasing that wheel. And to me, that's what sport is all about. It doesn't matter if you're first or 200th. Make yourself proud, make everyone else around you smile, help others when you can along the way. And it was one of the best experiences I've had in endurance sports. And, since coming back, I'm already looking at what other events I can do that are similar. And yeah, absolutely loved it.
Brilliant, man. I'm glad you had such a good experience, even if the race itself didn't play itself out. That it sounds like you had a really good time.
And that's the thing that's come with experience and time, and maybe to do with my age as well, that I'm not so fixated on results, of whether it's top 10, top 20. That's important, that motivates me, but experiences, I know that I'm going to hold on to that experience for years and years and years, and I've learned a lot, and I feel really fulfilled from that race. Whereas I could have ended up with 10th place overall, which on my Palmares would be great and help me, but at the end of the day, I know that I got an enormous amount of pleasure out of that race. And yeah, I can't wait for the next one. So if there's any kind of lessons learned from that to anyone listening, is once that kind of A goal has fallen aside, even if it's not your fault, there's definitely an exciting B kind of target within that. You've just got to find it, and you'll only find it by smiling and working really hard, and you don't know what's around the corner. There could be another Ali Brownlee 2 hours up the road waiting for you. You just don't know. So yeah, finish what you start and give it 100%. And it doesn't matter if you're first or last. It really doesn't.
So go back to when you were ill then, because you were. I'm always conscious people listening might be in the same position that you or I have been in. So you were ill enough where you were not just not exercising, but you had a 4-week period where you pretty much didn't get out of bed. And 2 weeks of that, we were pretty worried that you were going to be kept in hospital full time. And it was only, I think, probably pig-headedness on your part that stopped that from happening. Luck, we'll call it.
Yeah, it was rough. And I look back and it feels like it was a different me then. I can't really relate to that feeling of, the biggest task is if I can drink 1 glass of water during the whole day to essentially keep me going, and absolutely terrible. So yeah, a lot of it came down to luck, and I was determined not to end up in hospital because I've got a bit of a fear of that. I want to be outside. I want to be in the great outdoors. But it's just showed me the ultimate lesson of the body bounces back a lot quicker than our minds perceive it to. And at times, after week 3, I was feeling like it's going to be impossible to race this year. It's going to be impossible to even find the energy to be excited by racing. Like everything just fell off a cliff. And part of my identity went with that because I build a lot of my year around exciting challenges, races, and big objectives. And they're all back on the cards. Like back to square one. And I'm not as fit as I'd like to be, and I'm not as fit as I was. But that's totally irrelevant. I'm really healthy. I'm fine again. Got the all clear from the doctors, and I've just proved in Scotland that I can do 4 hours at basically a maximal effort. And here I am the next day feeling okay. So yeah, to anyone who feels like their year has unraveled, it's only unraveled compared to the original plan. But there are so many other plans you can build in. Just be flexible with it and find, I don't know, find something that keeps you excited. And it might not be top 10 anymore. It might not be get under 12 hours. Being on that start line is really exciting if you're healthy. So aim for that. Just try and get to a start line healthy, and fitness will take care of itself slowly but surely. And another lesson is don't rush it. I could have easily rushed it, and thanks to your help, Rob, I didn't. And at times it would have felt like I could have got back on my bike, maybe, but that would have done nothing apart from put me back in bed earlier than I'd want to be. So yeah, believe in the process, believe in the plan, believe in your coaches, as long as you're kind of aligned with that philosophy. And time's the best healer. For me, it took 6 weeks. It might take 6 months. I was open to that as well. But
and how long have you been training again for now after being ill?
So the start of that was basically a few days before our Mallorca camp.
So that was end of April. So you've gone from the point you'd been 6 weeks out of training completely.
Yeah.
And you've really only been back moving again for 4 weeks.
Yeah. And I say training, it's pretty loose. I've basically been endurance riding, and I did 3 or 4 intervals just to check, basically a system check as opposed to real intervals, to see if I could hold numbers that could be competitive, and actually, more importantly, see what would happen to my heart rate and whether there were any health risks off the back of real hard efforts. And Mallorca gave me a huge sense of confidence that I could do hours in the saddle, and it came at a really good time. And yeah, it was very loose training because I was basically just trying to stay active and do endurance miles to make sure that I could get around 115 kilometers. And by the end of Mallorca, I had that confidence, and then kicked on a little bit since then. And here I am, ready to go again. It's amazing.
It's amazing, isn't it? How when you're in the depth of illness and having lost your health, I think you alluded to it really well, saying you lose your sense of identity. You lose your sense of identity as an athlete. Once you've not done something for even a few days through illness, I think you lose that ability to remember. The feeling is I will never be an athlete. And not only that, I never have been an athlete. We're kind of like dogs in that sense. We live in the moment a lot. And it's an interesting reflection that you were 6 weeks out and 4 weeks back. And, so let's say 3 weeks is half of the 6 weeks, half the time you were ill for, to get back to probably 98% of the level that you were at, to be able to race at the front of a UCI gravel races is a really serious level of fitness. And I know to you, it feels as though, there's a gap between where you are and where you ideally wanted to be. But in reality, I think that gap is mainly mental rather than physical. It always blows my mind how quickly the body bounces back, and just how much of the fitness we've built stays in the body, even when you do absolutely nothing for an extended period of time.
And that's where, we always talk about consistency as coaches, and we always try and remind our athletes that the best thing you can do is not buy aero socks, aero helmet, position on the bike. That's all really important. But there's a really glaring stone that you need to look under, which is, are you being as consistent as you can be and need to be? And luckily enough, I've got 8 years of consistency under my belt. And, when I met up with my mate in Scotland who was also racing, he was asking me, like, are you ready to race? I know you were pretty ill. Like, are you ready? And my answer, without trying to be witty or anything, was a genuine one, which was like, I've had 6 weeks off, but I've had 8 years on. I've had 8 years to prepare for this race. My body doesn't know which race I've been preparing for. In my mind, I've had 8 years of really consistent, hard, progressive training, and here I am on the start line. And the 6 weeks is minute. The timing wasn't great, but it's a minute percentage of the overall kind of training that I've done. So yeah, I was on the start line, and I wasn't that confident in terms of result, but I was super confident that I've got 8 years training under my belt. And to me, it's just a celebration. And, with COVID and with health, all these things that have affected us all at different points, like we don't know how many healthy races we're going to have for whatever reason. So I was just on the start line, and I was, I had goosebumps thinking, I didn't think this was going to happen, and now I've got it. This is about to happen, and it doesn't matter what is thrown at me. I'm going to find a way to get something out of it. And I've learned a lot, whether it's tire management on rocky sections or how to pace myself over 4 hours of maximal effort. And I've learned a lot, and I know I'll be a better athlete on the next start line. And the easy option would have been to turn back and save myself for the next race, but I know that I'm going to be a better racer on the next one. Yeah, if anyone is in that similar scenario next time, be self-sufficient, have all the tools you need, and don't give up. Like, give it 100% anyway. Doesn't matter what the other 1,000 people are doing. If you're fit, healthy, go for it. You're going to learn something from it.
Yeah, 100%. Well, you mentioned Mallorca there. That brings us around to talking about the next point. And I think a lot of these conversation threads are going to weave in and out of each other, because the be self-sufficient part, be able to fix your own bike part, is something that popped up for us on our camp in Mallorca, for our weekend training camp in the UK that we did as well. It's the idea of learning how to take care of your own equipment, so that if you're out with a gang, you're not relying on somebody else to be able to fix your stuff for you. You can take care of it yourself. And I think it was an interesting reflection for me when we were away, and so much has moved towards tubeless tires, and you convinced me to get a set. I watched somebody with a puncture in tubeless tires, and it occurred to me, I wouldn't have a clue how to fix that. I don't know how to put a plug in. I don't know how the thing's meant to seal. New things come along all the time, and we have to keep on top of it, don't we? If you've upgraded to DI2 or ETAP or whatever, you need to know how to run the basic diagnostics so that stays working. I'm really confident with an Allen key and a screwdriver from back in the day, and give me an auto mechanical set, I can fix them all day long. Wouldn't know which end of the DI2 to plug in because I've never used it, So it has been a lesson to me in thinking, right, I need to learn the stuff that's going to help my athletes out as well. But an even better level of that would be being really confident that all my athletes know how to look after themselves out on the road. And I'm going to be kind and polite here and say I'm not 100% convinced that all of our athletes knew how to do that on the camps we were away on.
Yeah, we've spoken about it before, and I do think that, and I think triathletes fall into this for some reason more than maybe cyclists, pure cyclists. And we rely on others too much, whether we rely on mechanics or support on route, especially when middle distance and long distance, it's so many hours. It's a massive adventure. And just because you're on tarmac doesn't mean that it's not an adventure. It is an adventure. And you need to be able to get from A to B by yourself and use aid stations as a top up and that kind of stuff. But don't rely on them for an inner tube. Don't rely on them for a spare battery. Don't rely on them on all those things that we do tend to rely on, because we want to be as light and as aero as possible. But the first thing is, and it should be everyone's primary goal, whether you're looking to for the overall win or whether you're looking to do your own race, you have to get to the finish line. That's the first objective. And even if it slows you down by 0.2 seconds, take an inner tube and practice how to put in an inner tube, whether you're using tubeless or clincher. It doesn't matter. You need to have full confidence in that setup. So yeah, it's I definitely I've had many mechanicals over the years, but I've never DNF'd, and I want to keep it that way. And last weekend was a good example. I could have easily DNF'd, but it took me time to fix it. But there is always a way to fix it.
Yeah,
so it should be the same for you guys.
Well, there's our challenge for listeners then. If you're sitting there thinking guiltily, I wouldn't know how to even take a tire off and put a different inner tube in, by next week's episode, we expect you to have got on there, got your spare wheel, had a practice, looked at a YouTube video, get yourself a set of those yellow Pedro's tire levers. Those things, man, those things could move the moon out of orbit. They're so strong. Every other tire lever I've ever tried has been made out of Haribo, but those ones are bomb proof. So yeah, as a shout out to them. We're not sponsored by them, but we should be. So yeah, learn to look after and fix your own stuff, and at the very least carry a bag of stuff with you that is going to look after you. So you've got your own tube, even if you don't know how to change it, then at least someone else can help you out at the roadside. Because the worst thing ever would be someone helping you using their stuff and then them having a problem and not being able to fix it. Yeah, it's harsh. So let's talk Mallorca then. We had a pretty wonderful week out of Mallorca, didn't we, leading up to the to frame it for the people who don't know, we organized our week. So it ended with the 312 Mallorca Sportif, which is an epic 3-distance Sportif that's either 170k, 225k, or 312k around Mallorca. And we did that because we wanted people to have an adventure. We wanted to build it around an event, and we've toyed in the idea in the past of arranging a camp abroad around a 70.3. I've been and done those, and it's fun, but you definitely can't train as much as you'd like leading up to it. You can't race as hard as you'd ideally like. It kind of falls between the posts a little bit. But with a Sportif on the last day of a training camp, ideally you're going to be building up to a really big ride anyway. So I think it was one of the best training camps I've done of all the ones I've done, having the excitement of that event on the last day.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree with you there, Rob. And the group dynamics were amazing during the whole week. I know that, and we reflected on this, we all turned up and we were all slightly stressed, you know, because we're stressed at home, work, we've got loads going on in our daily lives. And at that first dinner, there was this sense of stress. We don't know what the week's going to be like. What's the 312? Do we even care about this event? What is it? You know, everyone's all a bit kind of on edge, I'd say. By day 2 and 3, it seems like everyone's been friends for a lifetime. You know, the conversations that were happening were amazing. Everyone was being so open-minded. Everyone was asking questions. Everyone was helping each other out. And people were just walking around the hotel beaming. You know, people were glowing, big smiles. And I put ourselves in that. I think there was a big difference in how we were as coaches as well, of being, you know, on edge and worrying about people's fitness, abilities, all these things. But actually, the athletes proved that they're really good as a group, and there's a great kind of human element to it. And I think the training was brilliant, but there's also no metric to measure just how fulfilling the week was, to spend a week on a beautiful island with like-minded people who are there for the same reasons. But we're all competitive, but not at the detriment of the group dynamic. And I feel that everyone brought the best out of each other, whether it's at meals or, you know, swimming, everyone giving each other swim tips, or on the bike. I saw loads of people, you know, handing bottles to each other, extra food, extra gel, without making a big song and dance about it.
Yeah.
And I loved it. And, you know, when we said goodbye to everyone, I feel that everyone had a similar experience of that was a true highlight of my kind of triathlon journey. And yeah, and then when you put that 312 event at the end of it, which, you know, we're talking about 8,000 cyclists from all around the world taking on some of the best roads in the world on a bike, closed roads. And it's not something that many people within our group had been training for, is kind of add it on at the end of the week. But we're all talking about doing it again. Everyone loved it. And so, yeah, to those athletes that were on there, thank you, because I got a lot out of it as an individual. And then to see our own athletes, you know, with our own eyes in the pool, working on technique, it massively helped me as a coach as well understand those athletes, because it's very different to see them on training peaks on a daily or weekly basis versus seeing them in a pool, seeing them how tiredness, fatigue affects them. And you know, we had athletes riding around 25 hours a week that week, which is not something that we'd advocate on a weekly basis at all. But it also shows how fit these athletes are. And they've got very different race goals and very different stages within their triathlon development. But I was massively impressed that they can go and do those 25 hours.
So some thoughts here around this then. I know this because I've done it for over a decade, but it always surprises me how much training people can get done and recover from and absorb in a week when all they have to focus on is training, resting, turning up for the meals that have been prepared for them, eating loads of good nutrition and going to bed. It always surprises me. And the idea of stacking 3 longer rides in a week leading to a 100 to 150 mile ride at the end of the week. The thought that you can get fitter across a single week and end 5 or 6 days later feeling much stronger and fitter than you started, it doesn't line up with any experience that you have in the normal world when you're at home, when you've got to do your own laundry, when you've got to cook your own meals or deal with whatever at home. The ability to absorb the training when you're out there is just a different level, isn't it?
And we've heard it many times from interviews of professional athletes at the top of the game, or athletes that have transitioned from being super strong age groupers into the professional scene. And they all seem to say that the big difference is the recovery, as in I've got time and I'm able to prioritize recovery. And we, as amateur athletes that have got full-time jobs and families, we think that recovery is, walking your son to Saturday football. Like, yeah, it's okay. It's not crazy, but it's not full recovery. It's not full recovery. So yeah, that's a massive difference. And we were literally, sleeping, training, eating, repeating. There was nothing else in there apart from a bit of casual social stuff, which I think enhanced the experience. But yeah, we all coped with a huge amount of volume, and I'm excited. I really hope we do it again next year, because seeing the kind of glowing, resplendent athlete that was walking around that hotel by the end of the week, it has a huge amount of positivity, I think.
Yeah. And the fact that the athletes can sort of interact, chat, encourage each other. I've always believed that the coach has the biggest effect on the athlete by saying to them, I've noticed this thing about you, and it's something you haven't noticed about yourself yet. Whatever that is, whether it's strength on the bike, the run, the swim, whatever. Sometimes the athlete then goes, oh, well, if you've noticed that, then something's changed, and now I realize it. Something that's unexpected on a training camp is when another athlete makes a comment to another athlete. You're looking really strong on the bike. Your pull looks much more efficient in the water. That gets added into the athlete's level of acceptance of themselves as an athlete. And I think a lot of those guys came on the camp feeling like they were going to be imposters, feeling like everyone else was an athlete, but they weren't really. Turned up and realized everyone was the same. Everyone was really kind to them. And lo and behold, in 7 days' time, people go home with a completely different self-image of themselves. One that is much more like our view of coaches of them than their view of themselves was when they arrived. And that's, I think, the biggest difference that happens in I hesitate to use the word camp because it brings up this, it's more like a training retreat, isn't it? It's a retreat from real life. And it's just an opportunity for people to leave feeling and being better than when they arrived. So to the people who are listening, who are not our coached athletes, if you're considering this, I think it's really, really worthwhile to go away, even for a few days, just focus on the training, book into a hotel, have someone else do the food, have someone else do the logistics for you, can make a massive difference. I even thought it's a great thing if you're training at home to not do your laundry for a couple of days, to kind of put that in a batch in 3 days' time. I mean, hopefully it wouldn't smell as bad as my laundry basket does. But that's the reality of the training environment, isn't it? You just don't worry quite so much about that and focus just on getting to bed and having a snooze when you get back from the training.
I think that's a good point, Rob. And last weekend is another great example of that. So we did a mini camp in inverted commas of a Friday evening, Saturday and Sunday. And it wasn't in Mallorca, it was in the UK, it was in Berkshire. And it just goes to show again that you don't need to be traveling the world to have a full-on training camp. We had 2.5 days. And again, the difference of the dynamic from the Friday evening to the Sunday. The Friday evening, we're all a bit on edge. Many of the athletes are thinking, I shouldn't be here. I'm not fit enough. I've had a terrible winter. I'm, looking across the table and seeing these amazing potential Kona potentials. But everyone's thinking that. So, no one's there that comfortable within that new environment. But by the end, when we were saying goodbye, I was really nearly reduced to tears just having shared that experience. And, we did a great 4-hour ride on completely new roads, technical roads, difficult roads. And there was a lot of stress around that. And people were thinking, I'm not good enough to get over those hills, or, I need smooth tarmac to get from A to B. But again, everyone proved that they worked on their bike skills, they were able to get over the climbs, and people had a huge smile on their face again. So it kind of goes to show that if you've got the opportunity, even just to go and do a long weekend away with training partners, with your club, with us, do it, because it breaks that routine of, oh God, I've got to wake up, I've got to walk the dog, I've got to go cook breakfast for everyone, I've got to and then I've got to go on the bike, and then I've got to recover, but then I've got to take Jimmy to football again. And the reality is you're kind of cramming in too much. We're doing multi-sport, and that's really hard to balance. So if you get the odd kind of fire break in that routine, and even go to the next county along if you're in the UK and book yourself a basic hotel with a pool, and you don't even need a pool. You can go and bike run for 2 days, and you'll come back refreshed, and it kind of resets the whole system again. And I think all the athletes agreed on that.
Yeah. It's that ability to just step outside of normal life for a little while, and your body gets shocked into absorbing more than it usually would do. Yeah, for sure.
Here's my final little comment on the importance of these kinds of retreats, training camps, long weekends, is that we're all, and I'm putting myself in this bracket, we're all working so bloody hard to increase our FTP, our run speed, our run efficiency, our aerobic capacity, our swim technique. We're working so hard day in, day out, and it's hard. But then make sure that you are able to put into practice that aerobic fitness. And there are many athletes, whether it was in Mallorca or the Berkshire weekend, that are at a point in their athleticism where their aerobic fitness is kind of stronger than other skill sets within their triathlon. And so a great example is one athlete could have an amazing FTP, and they're going to increase it again of the next 6 weeks by, it could be as much as 10%, because their trajectory is going in that way. But the reality is that they're really struggling to handle their bike, and to handle their bike at speed. So if they're increasing their speed, the reality is on race day, they're not going to be going any faster, because they're going to be on the brakes the whole time. So if you're one of these athletes that's thinking, I'm working so bloody hard and I'm not getting faster on race day, don't just look at your aerobic or anaerobic capacity. Look at, am I able to translate all this fitness into speed on race day? And that doesn't just mean aero socks, aero helmet, bike position. That means, can you get round a real tight cone really quickly, safely and quickly? If you can't,
there's free speed to be had there.
That's your biggest weakness. It's not your aerobic capacity. And I think that was really obvious to us as coaches, in Mallorca, looking at people coming down on the first day of these fast descents. Some of these athletes are really fit, really fast. But as soon as there's a corner or any kind of technical element to the course, then they're losing all that advantage that they would have over other athletes. So it might not feel like training if you go to a car park and ride around some cones for an hour. But if you can kind of integrate that as part of the learning and education within your triathlon, give it a year and you're going to be a lot better. And it's kind of this thing with swimming as well. If you're swimming quick hundreds in the pool, but you're not translating that into the open water, then there's your big area to work on. So I found that really interesting from a coach's point of view, to see that there is a kind of disparity, there is a gap between all the training we're doing, and sometimes we're unable to translate that into the obvious arena, which is race day. And there is a bridge to be made there.
The bike handling thing's a really big and interesting part of raceability and race dynamics. And I'm a big fan even of athletes using their shorter long ride on the recovery week to gently ride up hills and then ride down the hills quickly and get comfortable going downhill quickly, learning to descend, learning the skills of descending quickly. Because if you're braking and slowing yourself down just because you're not confident, we heard that a lot, didn't we? We heard people say, I'm just not confident in the road surface, or I'm not confident in the bike's ability to stay upright around the corners. the reality is that's a feeling in an athlete's mind that's holding them back. There's no problem with the bike's tires or the road surface because everyone else is going around those corners faster. It's about the athletes becoming more confident that they can go down those corners at a little bit more speed. It doesn't have to be, 100% straight away, but every small gain is really, really going to help there.
Yeah. So athletes that are doing the likes of Ironman UK, Wales, Ironman Nice, where there are some descents, there are some corners, there are some technicalities to those courses. If you're one of those athletes and you don't have that kind of 100% confidence that you're at your pinnacle in terms of bike handling, then it's worth doing that on your easy rides and finding roads that you're not so used to or that may feel more challenging for various reasons. Put yourself in that uncomfortable position to make sure that you are comfortable come race day, because there's no point us being really good on our indoor trainer and putting out amazing numbers if you can't translate those onto the real road.
100%, mate. Right, now listen, I want to go over some well dones for the team. I've got my little book here with the race results. We've had a few weeks ends of racing here, so it's been very interesting to sit down over the last few weeks and today and map out some race results against people's race ready scores. And we're a couple of years into race ready now, and really we're at the end where we're thinking we've always been confident in a correlation between a high race ready score and a great race. So let's sit down and let's have a look at people, how they've raced against what their race ready score is actually. And the correlation is really good, like we knew it was going to be. We've got athletes in the green having great races all the time. So an above 75% race ready score. I'm even starting to wonder whether that 75% layer is maybe even a bit too high. Maybe it's above 70%, because when I was looking, Beth won her age group Outlaw Half this weekend. She went 4:53, which is really solid, 6th overall. Won the age group, 7th overall, with a 72% race ready score. So right on the verge of where we've got the green at the moment. So it just goes to show maybe even that the threshold for can you translate your fitness into race performance is perhaps even lower than we considered it was. Emma got 2nd in age group. She had a 96% race ready score, so super, super high. Shout out to Grant. Grant was doing his first 70.3 in close to a decade. He had 5:33 on the board to beat, and I think we knew he was going to go a lot faster than that, looking at the shape he was in Mallorca. He smashed it, 4:48 Outlaw Half for 13th in age group, and that correlates to a 91% race ready score. So he went in there super confident, didn't he? And if anything, it was the people around him saying to him, no, mate, you're going to go a lot faster than, I think he was saying, I'd love to break 5 hours. And we were all going, no, you need to be aiming much faster than that. We had James Hall went over to the USA. He raced this Triple T race. Have you heard of this, where you basically do an Ironman across a weekend, don't you? It's broken into a super sprint, then 2 Olympics on the Saturday, and then a half iron on the Sunday. He backed up his races, man. I looked at the numbers. He went 5:33 in the half Ironman race. Brilliant. to win the age group overall. His score's sitting at 81% as well, so solidly into the green. But to be able to back up a 5:33 half Ironman off the back of racing 2 Olympics the day before and a super sprint the day before that, comes down to what you said before, the consistency of training, preparing you to be able to bounce back is just brilliant.
And here's another element to that. And James is a great example, because I was lucky enough to see an insight into his training last year when I worked on the high performance program with him. And there's different levels of consistency. He's been, I think you mentioned in the 80s over the last 12 weeks, for example. But I also know that last year he was well into the 80s and 90s for the vast majority of the race season. So that kind of season of fitness and consistency is massively going to help in terms of this year. And when you start backing up those seasons after seasons of being in the green, it kind of comes to the point where it doesn't matter if you have 6 weeks of illness like I had, because you've got the race readiness of the year before.
Yeah, you got the depth of fitness there, haven't you?
And that doesn't go as quickly as we think. So yeah, massive congratulations to those guys. Really impressive.
And the last one I wanted to give a shout out was to Sarah. Sarah is in her first year with us, moved over from like a competitive golf background and just loves everything about triathlon. She managed to qualify for the World Long Distance Triathlon Championships out in Ibiza, went into it with a 97% score. And she was really, I think it's fair to say she was really not convinced that she should have been there at the World Championship. She felt she had the imposter syndrome going on, and we kept saying, no, don't you worry. Your training's going well. Your racing's going well. The 97% score going in there got her into 14th place in the World Championships in age group, which is an amazing performance in sort of the first real season of racing triathlon properly. There's much more to come. Like you said, that's 97% and I'm there in 12 weeks. Imagine what that's going to be in 2 years, in 3 years, in 4 years' time with the score of that consistency.
Yeah, massive congratulations to her. That's very impressive. What a debut. I mean, that's kind of the pinnacle many dream of. And she come in, and obviously there's a huge amount of talent there and all the athletes that you just mentioned. But the thing that impresses me the most out of these athletes is their kind of commitment to the sport, and they look under every stone, and they look under the consistency stone, but they also look under the how can I get faster in my overall package. And yeah, they turn up, and I see in Training Peaks some of them are, you know, getting up at 5 a.m. and doing their long runs. They're getting it in, they're finding a way, and yeah, they get rewarded. And it's very rare that in endurance sport, if you put in the work and you put in the consistency, that you don't get rewarded. The rewards will come. It takes time, and it takes a lot of courage, and takes a lot of kind of mental fortitude and grit and motivation, all those things. But if you put it all together consistently, then you'll be mentioned by Coach Rob on the podcast, which is pretty great.
There's no shortcuts. You've just got to keep putting them together week after week. Yeah. All right, well, listen, that's just about brought us, I think, to the end of this episode. I want to give a shout out to us.
Sorry,
go on.
I'm going to
go for it.
I'm going to be really rude. We'd love to hear what you've been up to, and it's not a question you get asked a lot because you don't. Coach Rob, what have you been up to in terms of, you know, a lot of the athletes listening will know that you've had difficult times with health over the past 2 years, and COVID was a massive kind of scare for you, and you've bounced back. And, you know, I've even seen since I've known you over the past year that you've had highs and lows in terms of, you know, difficult fatigue that's off the back of the likes of long COVID. But I feel that maybe Mallorca came at a good time for you, and you joined us in the Berkshire 3-day camp as well. And you've been riding a lot, and it may not, you know, let's forget athlete Rob from 10 years ago. It's more like, how's the health and the progression gone for you?
I'm loving it again, Chris. I'm loving the ability to get out and ride my bike. And there's caveats. I have to limit my intensity, and I can't run anymore. But to get back to be able to ride on a bike, this is the big lesson that we always knew is that if you get to go out and ride your bike in the fresh air, it's fantastic. And it allows you to let go of speed and power and average pace and things, and just think it's another day I get to get out there and ride my bike. So for me to get to the point where, I think you remember this time last year, I was looking at buying an e-bike so I could go out for rides with people and keep up with people. I actually bought one and sent it back because my health picked up so much. I thought, I don't need this thing anymore. So to get out and ride with people is fantastic again. And it's interesting. It's something that I think isn't talked about in society at all, and let alone amongst athletes in society. There are 2.5 million long COVID sufferers in the UK. It is a long term, and who knows whether it'll be lifelong, but it's 2.5 years in for me at this point. I can have days when days feel perfectly normal. I can have days when just the weirdest things happen health-wise. Often it's just really bad fatigue where I have to go back to bed. But sometimes, I mean, a week, it wasn't even a week before Mallorca, was it? I came down with vertigo overnight, which I've never had before in my life. Couldn't get out of bed, couldn't get to the bathroom, felt like I was on a spinning ship. And I'm in a long COVID sort of support group, and texted the guys, and they were like, oh yeah, I suffer from this, man. You know, wait it out 12, 14 hours, you'll be fine. But there are so many people going through this in society that it's not even about I mean, I am the least sick person. That's my claim to fame. The least sick person in the long COVID group. I want to claim that. There are people in there who are suffering the most horrendous ongoing symptoms where they, you know, one of the ladies loses her sight on a weekly basis. She wakes up, she can't see anything. It's like intermittent blindness. The long-term health things that go on, so difficult. And I think if there are people listening who are in the athletic community and it's also crossed over with a COVID recovery not having gone the way you want it to, know that you're not on your own. Know that there's lots of other people out there who are going through it. I'm going to hopefully line up an interview soon with someone who can help people through this, because I'm sure there are more people not being talked about who struggle with this. But I'd also like them to know that it is possible to make a comeback in health and fitness to the point where you can go and ride out to Mallorca and ride for 6 hours. And it's not about killing it up the climbs. It's about looking around at the trees and thinking, well, this is amazing. And if anything, cycling's got more enjoyable because I'm not allowed to go hard. It's got more enjoyable, which is a really unintended but amazing consequence of it.
Yeah, well, I've seen the past year of your ups and downs with training, and I think on behalf everyone listening to this that knows you, they'd want to thank you because you've been so supportive of other people that have been struggling, and we may not realize that you've been struggling with your own health at times, and you're always there advising the athletes so well on what to do if they've got a nigger or some sort of illness. And yeah, to hear that and see with my own eyes that, you know, you riding your bike in Mallorca for 4 hours or even longer is truly amazing. And you know, you're not sour about it, which I think is a great lesson for other athletes, including myself. You know, I know that I'm a selfish athlete at times, and I fall into the trap of thinking if it's not going my way, then what's the point? Stop the whole sport. Everything's crap. But then when I spend time with you and see the way that you support other athletes that are either struggling or maybe not even struggling from illness or injury, but just in terms of their confidence in the sport, you're always kind of picking people up. So I'm sure other people listening want to pick you up and kind of thank you for sticking by them when they struggle. And yeah, can't wait to see you at the next camp.
Thanks, man. That's really kind of you.
That's great.
Oh, bless you. All right, well, listen, that's a really cool point to wrap this one up, I think. I hope people listening have enjoyed it. Let's give a shout out to our sponsors, Precision Fuel and Hydration. Remember, you can get over to their website and use the fuel and hydration planning tool and get a personalized strategy for your next race. These guys were awesome, weren't they? They sent us massive care parcel over for our UK training weekend, and everyone was so chuffed with, you know, the mix of gels, drink mixes, chews, electrolyte sachets. It was great. Everyone went home with a little baggie full of stuff, which was amazing. They're such a cool company. They're such a great bunch of men and women. I really believe in supporting people who are just great companies and great people. So get over to precisionfuelandhydration.com, and remember, you can use the code OA23. That'll get you 15% off your first order of electrolyte chews and carbohydrate drink. And I'd advise ordering loads of it because it's really good stuff. Keep those cramps at bay. All right, guys. So if you are also looking for help with your triathlon training, triathlon coaching, you can head over to teamoxygenaddict.com, book a chat with Chris. All right. We'd love to hear about how we can help you guys out with your triathlon training. If you're a cyclist, a swimmer, a runner, we've got training plans that can help you guys out as well. But we are focused mainly on the 70.3 and iron distance races. And that's really it's our bread and butter, isn't it? It's the thing that really makes us go. Also, if you're a gravel biker, Chris is the man. Gravel man Chris. So there's a link in the show notes. You can book through to Chris or I's calendar and have a chat with us, and we'd love to see how we can best help you out for a fantastic 2023 and beyond even. So remember, there's links in the show notes. You don't have to remember them. And until next week, have a great, safe training and racing week. Right, Chris, let's nail this week. I'm Coach Rob Wilby.
I'm Coach Chris Palfreyman.
Yes. And you've been listening to the Oxygen Addict podcast.